Talking with our good friend, political analyst Paul Rosicki. The news coming in overnight, very historic here in the U.S. A former president now indicted on federal charges. First of all, what are your general reactions to what's gone down here?
Well, in one sense, I'm not surprised. We expected it to happen. It was a little earlier than we thought. But my take right now is that I'm not so sure it'll have a big effect on his nomination possibilities. With the earlier indictments for the Stormy Daniels issue, it seemed to actually boost his popularity a little bit among his supporters. I think the real issue, though, is not so much the primary election. I think, as I say, at the moment right now, Trump looks like he's in a pretty good position for the Republican primary election. He's still out in front of the dozen or so other candidates. And that looks like it could be a rehash of 2016 when Trump got 30% of the vote or so, 40% of the vote, but still won the nomination because there were so many other candidates. The real question I have, though, is that in the general election, is this Trump fatigue going to be so strong that it'll really almost guarantee a defeat? That's my guess right now. I think one thing worth watching is to see what other Republicans do. For the most part, what I've seen so far is that a number of the big name Republicans are generally supporting Trump. They're denouncing the FBI and the Justice Department and so forth. But I wonder in the long run whether or not you're going to see more and more Republicans pulling away and maybe looking for some alternative. The real question, though, is whether they can find an alternative when there's a dozen or more candidates running against Trump.
We don't know yet what the exact charges are, but the reports are that there are 7 counts in this indictment, and they seem to focus on one, the fact that the former president had these classified documents in his possession post-presidency, and that he, engaged in, or at least those in his employ engaged in obstructing the government's efforts to get those documents back, for lack of a better way to explain it.
What I've seen so far, that's true.
So how significant is all of that, do you think? And do you anticipate that this is actually going to go to trial and result in convictions?
It may well. I mean, it's hard to say exactly what will happen if it goes to trial. What'll be interesting to see is, though, given the time frame, is that by the time if this goes to trial, it may be just in the beginning of the campaign, and it could be the strangest presidential campaign we've ever seen in 2024. Where you've got one candidate who's facing potentially criminal charges, having a trial going on during the campaign and all that. So as I say, if he gets the nomination and if this goes to trial, it could be a very strange 2024 campaign because it'll probably be happening just about the time when the campaign is heating up.
We've already heard from the former president, and the responses have been what I think everyone would expect. He's calling this very political, that his political enemies, translated Democrats, are trying to get him out of this campaign. Aside from the fact that this is a Justice Department that is currently under a Democratic administration, this really has been a nonpartisan, a very independent investigation in that, Jack Smith is an independent. He was originally someone who had been appointed, if I'm not mistaken, by a Republican.
That's correct.
And this indictment is in Florida, which is now the former president's home state and a very conservative state.
Right.
Your take on all of that?
I think that the appearance is important. I mean, clearly, if this was portrayed as a partisan activity, Trump could play off it, and he will play off it in some ways. But to the extent that it comes across as a fairly nonpartisan activity, maybe even from some Republican supporters, Republican states, clearly is going to suggest that this may not simply be a political ploy by the Democrats. In fact, there's a lot of Democrats who think Trump might be the weakest candidate to run against in 2024. So it's hard to say where that would go. But again, I think Trump is going to attack the FBI. He'll attack the Justice Department. And he will have his supporters, maybe about 30% of the Republican Party or so, who will back him. But beyond that, it's hard to see where he gets much more support. And as I say, I think this whole idea of Trump fatigue is going to play a major role in the general election in 2024.
Do you think the best move for the Democrats is to do what they've done so far, and that's to keep quiet from the president on down?
I think so. I think that's probably true. I think the old slogan is that when your adversary is shooting himself in the foot, just stand aside and let him do it. And that's about what's happening here. I think in large part, Joe Biden and Democrats are not going to say too much. They'll just let things play out and let Trump do his thing among his own party as he sees fit.
We have also seen the president himself, Joe Biden, and the former vice president, Mike Pence, accused of having classified documents in their possession. In fact, I guess it was proven they had the documents. Right. But talk, if you will, about the differences between their cases and why they have, why the Justice Department has not pursued charges against them versus the former President Trump.
Yeah, I think the main difference is that they all once they found out they had the documents, they all willingly volunteered to give them up without too much trouble. Trump seems to have gone out of his way to avoid giving those up, and really forced the FBI to stage a search of Mar-a-Lago to find the documents, and even then there was some resistance. So I think the real key here was that there was so much resistance from Trump compared to the fact that the other individuals said, "Oh my gosh, I got these documents. Here, come and get them. You're welcome to them." There was a real different reaction in terms of how they responded once they found they had the documents.
Anything that we're missing here, from the political aspect of all of this that you think folks should know about?
I mean, it's the strangest politics. We've never seen a campaign where there's these criminal indictments coming down the pike. And by the way, this is not the final story. There still could be indictments out of Georgia over the attempt to change the votes in Georgia as well. One thing worth watching, too, is what effect this has on Republican donors. Will they hold back? Even if they don't formally attack Trump, will they simply decide they're not going to write any more checks for Trump as well? That's a possibility that could be a big issue for 2024, too.
Paul Rosicki, we always appreciate your insight, sir. Thank you for taking time.
Good to be here. Good to talk to you. Have a good afternoon.